The Guardians have tried so hard to develop a good farm system and get themselves to a division title and get back to the playoffs. And last year, they got so far. They got to the playoffs. And things have not gone well for them in 2023. And we're going to talk about some of the prospects today and some of the non-drafted free agents. Try to get them there because in the end, it might not even matter.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I am Jeff Ellis. Over there is Justin. We have no title sponsors, so let's just dive in and have some fun. We're going to talk prospects. We're going to talk about we've only had 2 draft signings, but we've also had 2 undrafted free agent signings. So we'll get into that, and we'll take some of your questions on today's Locked On Guardians. Are we starting off with prospects? Or are we starting off with Bieber?
Let's talk about the new guys real quick. We'll talk about Bieber and the news on that and a couple. Let's get past the new guys in the system.
Okay, so we already mentioned the 2 players they signed. One of them, don't go looking for Jake Berry unless you put a minus Jacob sign on it, because all you're going to get is Jacob Berry, who was, the overdraft last year by the Marlins. That's right, I said it, the overdraft last year by the Marlins. Jake Berry is a big boy, to put it not politely. A 6'10", 235 pitcher. His dad was a basketball player. His grandfather is in 6'6". His grandfather is 6'9". This is a guy who comes from a big family. His grandpa played basketball and baseball at Northwestern. Berry was a basketball player, and then he needed 2 knee surgeries in high school, and he decided to stick with baseball. So he has 2 knee surgeries, didn't play at all his senior year of school. Would not have played that final year of high school. He just turned 22, so he is, I think I'd have to double check, but I think he is, he's senior aged. Let's just go ahead. Yeah, he was a 2020 kid, but he was an older player. He's one of those kids who, even in the old system, would have been, 19 on draft day. So he was technically draft eligible last year as well. Didn't get drafted. He's a big kid, didn't get any opportunities to start for the most part, had all of 10 starts, actually had 9 in 22 and only 1 this year. Limited innings, but in spite of having that knee issue in high school, he's been healthy, missed bats. And the thing when you're 6'10" is, yes, mechanics are always a concern, but when you have that he's an interesting gamble. 100%, a very interesting gamble for them. I was going to look up how much. I think in the past it's been 20,000 is the max you could offer an undrafted free agent in baseball. This isn't like football where you can sit there and offer them whatever they want. But he is maybe the higher ceiling of these 2 guys. The other player who's, I don't know, if quote unquote the safer one is Rohrik Maltrude. He has bounced around. He's going to be 23 in September. He was supposed to go to Oklahoma back in 2019. That's right. He started college back in 2019. He was a 2018 draft class. So we're talking, the full 5 years that he got in his time there. Didn't go to Oklahoma. He might have actually gone to Oklahoma and then transferred out, but was a University of Oklahoma player at first. Then went to Grayson Community College for 2 years. Then went to New Mexico State, which is maybe the worst environment to pitch in, and was successful there. And then this year was able to end up in the SEC at Missouri at the 6-week point of the college baseball season. The NCAA website listed their top 10 college relievers. Guys like Nolan McLean at 6, Camden Minucci at 4, who we've saw take and get drafted. Nick Maldonado at 2. Rohrik Maltrude was 8. Number 1, Andrew Walters. So Guardians got 2 of the guys from this list. He's probably both these guys were primarily relievers, and you can try them out as starters. But this is a situation where, since they're both relievers, they also didn't throw a ton of innings. This could also help with the backfill. So when we talk about the problems with backfill and needing some arms, even if they're low inning starters, they're two interesting players. One, we've talked about guys who bounce around a lot and don't have a lot of continuity, sometimes have more growth. And a guy who's 6'10", who was not necessarily baseball focused until he got to college and then didn't get as many opportunities, has some growth. Now, the fact they went undrafted also speaks to how most teams view them in terms of the overall picture. And like I said, I believe I'll double check when Justin's talking about prospects. I believe it's only $20K. That's the max you can get to sign. But if you're a pitcher, why not go to Cleveland and see if they can unlock more, right? Like, there's a logic to that for sure. But I think they're two really solid, really good additions. We still only know Tugboat and Bresnahan. So Cleveland is currently 225 over the cap, and I think they can go 480 over the cap. So we'll have to see. This is par for the course. Listen, it always comes out slowly with them. Everything. There are no loose lips in Cleveland. I know a lot of people are like, oh, they got their pocket picked with the Colt Emerson pick. I don't know if we know that, because nothing ever sneaks out. Did anyone have them connected to Ralphie Velasquez in this entire draft process? Not a soul. No. Did you ever hear Alex Clemmy? No. I mean, Andrew Walters, I think both myself and Willie said kind of fits their mold to some degree. Didn't necessarily expect him in the comp round, but yeah, let's remember, loose lips sink ships, and Cleveland's lips are never loose.
That is very true. Remember that come trading deadline too, and when things kind of pick up, July 20th, so we've got 10 days, about 11 days till the trade deadline. So when that happens, just keep that in mind. The Guardians are just trying to get those guys one step closer to the majors and find somewhere they belong in the system. Speaking of relievers, and quickly move on here. I got a couple I want to get to, but in the minor league system, we talk about guys that bounced around a lot. Franco Aleman was a guy who I believe went to 3 colleges. I think he landed at Florida his junior year. His only year at Florida. Yeah, that was the year the Guardians took 3 Florida pitchers because they, obviously Florida is really good at developing arms.
I got new argument on draft night about that. I'm not going to say it to you. I'm not going to call anyone out, but yeah, I got to.
They obviously really love.
They really like what Florida does, and I'm like, actually, it's the opposite. For those who are curious, Florida International University, St. John's River State College. St. John's
River, yeah. And then Miami.
And that St. John's, by the way, is also in Florida. So 3 separate Florida schools for him.
Yeah. So he bounced around quite a bit, had a big arm and didn't really have a consistent role at Florida. And this is very similar to what the Guardians have tried to do with some arms in this draft as well and last year. So last year, I saw Aleman quite a bit at Lake County, and I was like, yeah, he's fine. Like, he throws decently hard. Like, he was 95, 96. And it's a long arm action. He was getting hit kind of hard. I thought, teams really pick up the ball out of his hand well because he has such a long arm motion. And I worry about how he's going to hold runners on. And I didn't know he had a second pitch. And I don't know if he has a second pitch still, truthfully. But I will at least take into consideration.
Guardians don't need 2 pitches. Andrew Walters, Franco Aleman.
If you come from the state of Florida, you don't need 2 pitches. You just need a good fastball. And Franco Aleman has a good fastball. Last night, this is what I'm talking about him. On Wednesday night, he pitched for Akron. He was 97 to about 99. I think he might have come close to hitting 100, depending on the reliability of
not him in college. Like, he was kind of more of a sinker, pitch to contact guy. He was not known for that big velocity, at least from the data I had at the time.
Yeah, now he's missing bats. That fastball's got some ride in it on it. It's getting inside on right-handers. It's up there. Guys are having a hard time with it. He's throwing for strikes. He had a slider that had some vertical to it. I think had a little bit of backup to it. I don't know that it's an average pitch, maybe a fringe average pitch, but he threw it for strikes. So that's what's important too for that. If he has that. If he can throw that slider for strikes and has that fastball that can miss bats, you have something there. And he's got an absurd 46% strike rate now, AA. And now, granted, this is 7 1/3 inning, so this is not a strong sample by any means. And the swing strike rate is 12.4%, so that doesn't quite match up. And if you're wondering, I don't really love swing strike percentage, honestly, because it takes out a lot of things. I'd rather see whiff rate, but Fangraphs has this, and generally what you can do is you can look at the swing strike rate, and you can about double it for the guy's strikeout rate. And this is applicable to hitters and pitchers. It's not a exact science, but it gives you kind of a range of outcomes here. So he's at 12.4%. That suggests he should be at in the 24 to 28 range ish for strikeouts. He's at 46. So I don't know how much that's going to hold up. It could just suggest that guys are having a hard time seeing the ball or squaring it up, or they're taking a lot of pitches. He's only got a 7.7% walk rate. So he's throwing a decent amount of strikes, which is good because this is not a guy who came into the system with a whole lot of control either. Could be a good relief prospect. He might be. It's not a long list of guys right now, obviously. Obviously with Misiazik and Mikolajek having Tommy John, it stinks. Nick Enright is still, battling through getting back from beating cancer, and he just got back off the inactive list. And then you got Cade Smith. So it might be Cade Smith, and it might be Franco Aleman right now.
I just want to
point
out
Andrew Walters.
Yeah, and Andrew Walters is probably going to be number one. Just one thing to point out to show that difference. At Florida, his strikeouts per 9, again, Florida, where half the guys he faced didn't even go on to play affiliate ball, 8.41. Since then, 12.13, 13.35, 14.73. Just a different animal now.
This is what the Guardians are trying to do, right? They're trying to find arms that bounce around, that have, some areas of improvement, like Florida
Maltrude,
arms.
It's Morehouse. I'm trying to think who else in this class, but there are multiple guys where you look. Who was the guy I really liked back in the day? I'm blanking on. Who bounced through 4 schools in 4 years. One's gone. But yeah, no, this is what they do. They definitely go out of their way to get these guys who have not had consistency.
All right. Well, don't give up. We've got more to talk about. I want to talk about a few more prospects. Jeff's got one prospect he wants to talk about. We're going to talk about the latest on Shane Bieber, and we're going to get to your questions in just a few moments.
For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. The eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home one win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Friday night, Guardians are back at home. We've got Gavin Williams and I believe Ranger Suarez for the Phillies. If you can't make it or can't watch it, listen on your SiriusXM app. Just search Guardians on the app. Should be a fun one. We didn't really talk about the Phillies that much. Okay, so we talked about Franco Aleman. I'm not going to spend too much time on some other guys because, look, it hasn't been the greatest year in the system. They've had kind of a lost year for a lot of guys. But Jose Perella, we don't get really deep into complex league guys because there's just like Instagram video out there on them and stats, so it's hard to
and the stats
really
are
measure
like
these things. The stats
to
are
some degree
completely worthless. I find Jose Perella to be interesting. He is 17 years old in the Dominican right now. He will not turn 18 until next April. So he is playing his first entire year in the pros at 17. That's a good thing.
Not to be confused with former San Diego and current KBO Jose Perella, second baseman.
Yeah, Stephen Jose Perella. But he might be bigger than that other Jose Perella. Jose Perella is listed at 6'3", 181. This is a 17-year-old who is a pretty big kid. He's playing some center field in the DSL right now. I don't know if he'll continue to play there because he might outgrow the position a little bit. For what stats are worth, he does have a 590 slugging percentage and a 253 ISO. I will say you don't often see a ton of power in those leagues because guys just aren't finding the barrel a ton, and there's a lot of walks and a lot of bad pitching. So the power is interesting. That's good. There's some swing and miss. He's walking quite a bit. But I just think it's interesting how big he is, how young he is, that he is showing some power at a level that's not typically common. So in a couple of years, he could be a guy who's at Lynchburg or High A, and he looks like Junior San Quentin, who right now is just a completely lost prospect. And there's very, very faint hope for him to do anything at best at this point. So you never know with these guys, because Junior San Quentin came in as a highly hyped guy who just really outgrew his position and just swings and misses like crazy now. So take these things with a grain of salt, but at least, the physicality is at least interesting, right?
Yes. No, I agree. And, we were kind of going through and doing a deep dive on some statistical profiles for a few guys, and
it's rough.
It's rough. And Junior San Quentin was like every negative profile though he popped up. So yeah, you always got to wait and see. I mean, I've always been the person on record is I don't typically rank guys who are in complex leagues. I know I did last year with Churio, but I had a little more view because
special case.
There's so little out there on them, and it's just everyone jumping on a hype train of a player they've never even seen. So, but
because he has a famous brother, right? Which that influenced a ton of it, unfortunately, which is unfair to Jason too, because Jason may become a good prospect in his own right, but everybody is going to compare him to Jackson, who is 19 years old in Double-A, and Jason's 17 and complex ball. And the Guardians are not going to promote him that fast because they never do that. So, Juan Brito, real quick, I'll mention too, continues to be good at Akron. We were having a conversation about Juan Brito. Where does he end up ranking in the system? And I'm trying to think. If you're talking about all the pitchers graduating, Bybee, Williams, Allen, Bo Naylor graduating, so you still have what? Espino, Rocchio, Cantillo, Valera. And I would say Brito is in that group right now.
Yes,
you're banking
probably
on
top three. I would have him higher than Valera at this point, honestly.
Yeah, you're still banking on the high ceiling that Valera and Espino offer. That's why they're still mentioning that conversation. Rocchio's still a solid prospect, although we can talk about how his power has completely gone away this year at AAA, which is very bizarre for the park he's playing in. And it's kind of the lowest power output he's had of his career. By the way, Bryan Rocchio serving game 2 of his 3-game suspension. He'll serve game 3 Friday. He was involved in the George Valera brawl last week against Nashville or 2 weeks ago. So he is serving.
He's not getting promoted. I know people got mad at you for just reporting the truth.
Everybody, when minor league lineups come out, we need to get into this. I mean, I want people to be excited about these prospects because that's part of what we do. We like to analyze prospects and we want people to get excited about them. But every lineup that comes out, we don't have to overanalyze that this guy's not in the lineup. I think it's a thing. Like sometimes it's just a day off, or sometimes a guy is suspended, like Bryan Rocchio or George Valera. George Valera did homer in his second game back on Thursday night, first homer of the year for him. So that's good news. But yeah, Brito, I think you're right. He is a top 5 prospect in the system right now. Is that a good thing with where the system is? Probably not, but it's still, he's still doing well. He gets the ball in the air. He pulls it.
Is that going to be
he pulls the ball
trade?
well?
Like the rare win with as well as Nolan Jones is playing, or is it going to be a net loss because this team is so desperate for power and Nolan Jones looks like the guy who one point in time Zips did have as a top 10 prospect in baseball.
Yeah, that's going to be a real paper cut for them. I don't know. I mean, I think Brito's going to be a good player for sure. Jones is kind of thriving in that ballpark, and he's going to be a good player, and he's exactly what they need. It could be a win-win, but I think everyone's going to continue to look at Nolan Jones and think about what if, even if he's a platoon guy. I don't really know how Brito profiles as a switch hitter either. I think he's got some issues from the right side, but from the left side, man, he pulls the heck out of the ball. He gets it in the air, maximizes his power output, even if there's not a lot there.
He's the first baseman of the future. He's the same size as Naylor in height. There's your future first baseman.
We'll talk about that in a little bit. Jose Tena has a 11.9% walk rate. His OBP is 342. He is not a guy who has walked that much in the past. Striking out a ton right now and has a low batting average. Not really much power, but I will say maybe if he is walking a little more, that is a sign in the right direction for him because that's a guy who needs it. I still think he is on the fringes of this 40-man roster right now, but we'll take positive signs where we can get them. You wanted to mention, speaking of the 40-man roster, a guy who might get back on the 40-man roster.
Bryan Lavastida is playing very well. You might have missed it because he was not playing well for a long time there, and he got taken off the 40-man. He's back up to AAA. He is, if you're looking at qualified hitters, I believe he's 17th in the system in weighted runs created plus. He had a fantastic night tonight. Would you say like 3 for 6 with a really high exit velocity double? He's been playing better and better of late. Go around baseball. Cleveland has 3 catchers. Cincinnati has 3 catchers. Pittsburgh has 3 catchers. The Giants have 3 catchers. 3 catchers are the vogue thing. Everyone's got 3. Lavastida is athletic. If more athletic than David Fry, and that's not to like crap on Fry. Like Lavastida was, I believe, a second baseman his first few years of college. There's going to be a team.
Third baseman.
Third base. I believe there was a little bit of time at second too. But I could be wrong in my memory. But he's a really athletic kid, and if you're a team, he might be easy to sneak through in a Rule 5 draft as a third catcher with some. He was a uniform top 10 prospect last year, and if we learned one lesson from Bo Naylor, it's don't let 1 year shake you off a guy. So in a year where there's only like 3 guys that we're maybe talking about adding to the 40-man. It makes sense to discuss that. And if you have not gone back and looked at Bryan Lavastida, he is performing. He's nearly has as many walks to strikeouts. That's very close. His BABIP, I believe, when I last looked, was over 300, which is another positive sign of contact. And he always got pretty good reviews for his defensive ability behind the plate too. It was not like a finished project, but he and Bo Naylor were kind of similar in their development. So I think Lavastida is a guy where I'm just going to go back to what I say all the time. You can get annoyed with me at this, but it's like development is not linear, and both in catching is incredibly hard. Like Rafi Velasquez, I love him to death. He's probably going to be a top 10 prospect for me. I really believe in that bat. I was the high man, right? I had him 21st on my big board. No one else had him in their top 30. I don't know if he's going to stick a catcher because I think the bat will make him move off that position. It's like people forget Bryce Harper was a catcher. The only reason he didn't stay at catcher is because at 19 he could play in the outfield. The bat was there. So catching is incredibly difficult. Be patient with Bo and don't forget about Bryan.
Agreed. So, and we like Bryan. He's a good kid. All right, we got to talk about Shane Bieber. We got to talk about Triston McKenzie, some injuries, and we got to get to your questions here. So stay tuned. Friday night, Guardians, Phillies in action. We don't see the Phillies too often. This will be a fun one. Hopefully it's a fun series for the Guardian. Make sure you are listening to all the action on your Sirius XM app. Just search Guardians on your app to get the broadcast.
They're coming from Milwaukee. I was just watching them today.
Yeah, a buddy of mine sent me a text about their flight trip or whatever, and how they were hovering over Cleveland because there was a lot of thunderstorms on Thursday night, and they couldn't land. And I was like, I've been there. When I was coming home from Jamaica, we had
was it the worst flight of your life?
Oh, I said I don't want to fly ever again. Unfortunately, the next day I had 3 flights to get back to Cleveland, but landing in a thunderstorm, I do not recommend. I should have had a Valium or something. Not that I condone any sort of drugs.
No, hey, you know what? I'm a nervous flyer. I still have lorazepam in here.
Hopefully,
that's what my doctor gave me to fly. Like, you know what? If things make you nervous, there's nothing wrong as long as you're not abusing it to do some things to help anxiety. If only BetterHelp was our sponsor today.
Right? Yeah, BetterHelp. Hopefully, go ahead.
You go first, then I'll throw my idea.
I was gonna say maybe their flight will. They had a whole night before. Maybe the flight will mess them up, and the Guardians will have a good series.
So my quick idea here on the fly, we want to talk Bieber. I don't know how much time we're gonna have for questions. Should we do one of the infamous long shows where we cut it off at about 30 minutes, and then if you want to go jump on and hear the rest of the show on YouTube, we'll have a kind of a longer edition to get through the questions.
Let's do it. We'll get through all the questions if you go to YouTube, and we'll tell you what timestamp to do it as well.
Yeah, so we'll get that all lined up for you. So I just want to throw that out there now. If you're like, hey, this is already kind of there, and they promised all this other stuff. Sometimes if we're going to deliver, we have to find ways to balance it out. We had some fun talking about prospects because that's where you and I both started. It is something that we always have. Like we literally spent probably about 3-4 hours this week discussing prospects as we were working on episodes after the fact. So let's talk arm injuries. Let's wait on arm injuries because that's worked so well for Andrew Painter and it worked so well for Shane Bieber since his last arm injury. So let's just keep waiting. Let's wait forever on these arm injuries. Maybe they'll naturally heal.
Yeah, elbows are just castles of glass, man. It's not good. Yeah, Bieber. The comment that was made to Zach had this in his article today too, saying that it's going to be a while on Bieber. That there's really no teams out there that are trying to trade for Shane Bieber right now with his injury. But it's going to be, he got good news, doesn't need surgery. Cross your fingers that is true, but it's not going to be a quick return. So we're talking Bieber, maybe a month from now, maybe early September. And obviously they're going to want him to come back and prove that he's healthy. I don't know what you do with him in the offseason. I really don't know.
They're on their way to a qualifying offer. That's my firm belief right now.
Well, he's got one more year of control. You're saying,
yeah.
Oh, you mean he's going to pitch out his contract and you just go to a qualifying offer?
Yeah.
Yeah, they almost never do that, but I think you're right. Michael Brantley, they didn't give Michael Brantley the qualifying offer, but that was the last time that they really allowed.
Yeah. Carlos Santana was the last qualifying offer, right? And it's been a while, but it's such a weird situation that this feels like the chance where it could happen.
What's the 2025 draft class look like, Jeff?
I'm not there yet. 2024 looks so flipping good.
A little too late for that. And unless you can trade for like a comp pick next year, which you can do.
Yeah, here's the thing. Like, I don't know. I'm kind of curious. Now I'm going to go to Tankathon and see where this team is ranked. But I want them to do good, even though it is a good year. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to worry about draft picks, but I am kind of curious at the overall order. Because right now Cleveland would have the 12th pick in the draft, which I believe that's when they drafted Will Benson, right?
And Chase DeLauder.
No, DeLauder was like 14. They'd never had that pick before. They had that was the first time they'd ever had that pick that they used for Chase DeLauder. Okay. They'd never picked that high.
So Benson was 12?
I believe Benson was 12. 16 for DeLauder. God, is it sad that I kind of thought it was 16? I can't remember like my best friend's birthday, but I can be like, yeah, Will Benson was the 12th pick, and let's see, 14th. I was wrong.
Okay.
But I can remember that DeLauder was 16, but still, they have not picked top 12. I think that means since Clint Frazier is the last time they picked.
Well, yeah, because
top 12 picks.
2012, they came very close to 100 losses thanks to the infamous 5 and 2021 month or something.
Yeah, so it's
pretty bad.
Yeah, look at this. It's San Diego and Chicago are the two teams, and then the Mets, as we all expected, are the three teams right above them.
Aren't the Mets going to have to go back 10 picks because of their payroll, unless they should payroll?
Oh, you're right. No,
you get
100%.
knocked down 10 picks.
So Cleveland is currently 12, but it'd be the 11th pick. Yeah. But then it'd be hilarious, and what I would root for is for anyone can win the draft lottery. Anyone who didn't make the postseason. So I would root for the Mets to fall back and then win. That would be hilarious. If they fell back to 19 and then won the lottery.
Oh, that'd be horrible for everybody.
That'd be hilarious. It'd be absolutely hilarious.
The news on Triston McKenzie, you said you didn't love the quote there. And the quote about Triston McKenzie, too, was need to be able to test the elbow at full intensity before the end of the season. They really need him to be able to test it. It's a litmus test to be able to get back to pitching in full intensity, pitching in a competitive setting, and how does the elbow respond? Both those cases to me sound like September at best. And here's the problem with McKenzie is that let's say he goes out and he tests the elbow and it comes back and it's not good. You're talking about August or September Tommy John, which means 2024 is also gone for him too. So you've wasted an entire season on trying to get him healthy, at least half a season, because the injury in spring training was not an elbow, but you wasted at least half the season after he came back on this elbow thing, only to find out he needs Tommy John. And then you don't have that guy for next year, and you're pitching with Shane Bieber on a 1-year contract.
And you've then lost 2, maybe more importantly, you only have 6 years of control. And then you're losing 2 of those 6 years of control. Because even if they're hurt, they're still getting the service time, right?
So, and at that point, you also dive into do we try to offer him a contract for a little security for him and try to get back a little for us, like for Cleveland?
Yeah, and he's not going to be sharp coming back. People forget it takes a whole year after Tommy John to get your command and control back. And this is for a guy who's kind of struggled with commanding his pitches when he's been in the big leagues. Like that was his bugaboo 2 years ago. And
this is why you try to avoid the surgery for reference. I mean, I understand like that's why you want to avoid the surgery, but when this kind of thing happens and it's like, okay, then we need it, then you lose so much time. So it is two sides of a very dangerous coin, unfortunately.
Yeah, and we at the same time, Shane Bieber's never been the same guy since his arm injury and rest. He hasn't.
Yeah.
He has never been the same guy since his arm injury and rest.
Yeah. Well, we're at the 30-minute mark here, and I don't know. I want to get into trade stuff too.
2 quick notes before we get into the mailbag, which will be on YouTube only. One, for undrafted free agents, you can offer them the full $150,000. So you can sit there and keep signing anyone to the same amount as a day 3 pick. And if you have any pool money left over, you can sign them for more. So let's say you ended up having 50,000 left from your pool. You could sign someone for 200,000. That's actually back in the day how the Reds got TJ Friedel. For those who are curious, they had extra pool money, and he went out and performed well in Cape Cod, and he was an undrafted free agent who was a draft eligible sophomore. And someone tried to claim like, oh, everyone knew he was. He didn't have a stellar year, so they went and got him. And there's also new draft and follow rules. So, like people talk about the Dodgers with DJ Ungalele, they can draft and follow him. If he doesn't play baseball, if he has a terrible year as a quarterback this year, which I believe he gets to start this year at Oregon State, wherever he is, and decides, okay, this isn't going to happen. If they can get him to pivot, then I believe it's draft and follow. That's what they're doing.
But I believe you have to play JUCO ball for that. He's not playing baseball at all. I thought that was a JUCO rule only. I could be wrong, but I thought he had to play JUCO ball.
But if he's not, I think this is like if he has a terrible football year, then I think they can still maybe get him because he hasn't played baseball yet. But I think you're right about the other component.
I don't know if that applies to guys who aren't playing baseball at all. It's fuzzy because obviously that rule wasn't designed with that in mind.
Yeah, and then
leave it to the Dodgers to try to skirt a rule. Let's be honest.
Of course. And I just did Tankathon until I got Cleveland, the number 2 pick in the draft. So the top 5 is Chicago, Cleveland, St. Louis, Washington, Cubs. So there's your Nick Kurtz for you.
Nick Kurtz,
just give you that.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Maybe not my guy, but for Justin's sake, I can get on board.
That's fine. I didn't get any. I didn't get any of my guys this year except for Tommy Hawk, and Tommy Hawk might be a backup, but whatever.
I like Mooney. Mooney is probably my guy. After Velasquez, like again, I was I loved that pick. But we're gonna take a break. Well, take a break. We're gonna do the whole thing here, but we want to thank you all who are sticking with us. I'm going to be traveling. I'll be here for Monday's show, and then I might be in and out. Well, just now I'll be texting, figuring out how we can, maybe make it work if anything big happens where I can, do something with decent quality. But we want to thank you all for being part of the Locked On Guardians team. Rate and review, download daily. Remember, that really helps. Download every day. Set it playing in the background on YouTube, and then set it playing again in the background on YouTube. Really help it out if you can. But thank you to all of you out there. I'm slowly working through comments. Justin Nelson, that's an everydayer. And Puck, I am not going to read your name because I know what it really means, but I will call you Puck, is another everydayer in here who whose name I see getting around some things. But thank you all, and go Guardians, go.
All right, so YouTube questions. All right, so let's. Do you want to dive in the mailbag? You want to talk trades a little bit? Well, we have a question on the trade deadline, so let's just go right to the mailbag, and we can get.
And I've also got the. Do you have the? I currently have, as I'm doing comments, the YouTube questions up as well. Yeah,
throw that my way as well. Let's start with Zach. We'll start with Twitter. Let's go with Zach. Dayan Frias.
Why? I'm kidding. Sorry, Zach. I'm being a jerk.
Dayan Frias, protect or expose to Rule 5. Look, the Guardians.
We had this debate yesterday off air.
We did have this debate yesterday off air. It was a good one because you want to know what? The Guardians no longer have a Rule 5 40-man crunch. It is a 40-man roster loaded with some odds and ends that can be taken apart and moved. We talked about Jose Tena, and you want to get Lavastida back out. I don't know. I'm on the fence whether or not I think even Dayan Frias is even ready. He's only at high A this year. I have a lot of doubts whether or not he is ready to jump to major leagues next year. If he was in Double A doing this, I would say without a doubt you put him on the 40-man roster. I think there's still a chance they would do it anyway, but I really have doubts whether or not he's even ready to make the jump to Pro Bowl. I like the year he's having. He's got 5 home runs this month, so he's starting to show a little more power. If they can get Juan Brito to AAA, I think that they can move Frias to AA. That would be good. I'm very skeptical whether or not he's ready to make the jump. So that's why I'm on the fence. But, if they might have the 40-man space to do it, why take the risk?
Yeah, I'm to the point. It's like, we were talking, you're going to add Espino. And then after him, it's like, who are your must-adds? It's Espino. And then we
maybe Lavastida.
Yeah, we debate Lavastida, debate Cade Smith, debate Frias, maybe debate Wilfredo Antunez, I mentioned to you. But just because like Antunez and Frias, there are some places I saw them list as top 20 prospects. I lean towards yes, because at the end of the day, which is now my new for delaying, but at the end of the day, Cam Gallagher's going to come off this roster, and Med Rosario is going to come off this roster. Please sooner than later, but at least those two. And then there could be other players that are not back. If they go make a trade, that might change the 40-man situation. But those two make it easy to add at least 2 guys. And there's ways to go out and add more. And I lean towards yes, because he's always had fans, but he seems to be finally producing.
Yeah, he's got patience. He doesn't strike out a lot, but I still need to see a AA as well, because stuff in high just doesn't translate, but he does have some good skills there. Like I said, why take the risk if you don't have to? Because you're going to have the space to do it. And if you really believe in him, might as well. So I think there's a good chance they might do that. Richard, do you think the Guardians should pursue an extension of Josh Naylor this offseason? What could that deal look like? I would just say go back and listen to Thursday's episode. We talked about, was that Wednesday's? That was Wednesday's episode.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go back and listen to Wednesday's episode because we talked about it there. Extension is, I do think they should explore it, but Jeff had a good point about how it's tricky because of his age.
And then the other thing I want to go and throw out is I live in Milwaukee because my wife is an physical anthropologist who specializes in like bones and how things go together. And when I told her the exact name of Josh Naylor's ankle injury, she made a horrific face today at lunch when I was discussing this with her, and talked about the fact that that type of injury can haunt his ankles for the rest of his life. So do you really want to, that injury with him again? I'm 6'1", 260. He's 5'11", 250. That's a lot of strain on those ankles too. So I'm just going to put that in there after a new discussion today, that you also just have to, A, why would you want to give up hitting free agency at age 28? B, there's some pretty big physical concerns.
Yeah, there's a lot of risk there on both sides. I mean, you could say if he wants to get paid now, he should consider it because of the future issues with his feet or his legs. So there is that aspect to it if he wants to secure some money now. But, also this offseason, he is in line to go very well in arbitration. And he is a Super 2 player, so he ends up with 4 years of arbitration. So there's not necessarily a need for him to take the contract because arbitration is going to pay him well anyway.
Yeah,
but
he's going to start getting paid.
Yeah, there is the chance too. He ends up like a Daniel Vogelbach or a Rowdy Tellez in his future, and he's let's be fair, Josh Naylor is a better hitter than those guys. Those guys are
100%.
Those guys are on new teams every season because they just don't have all they can do is walk and mash. Naylor's a hitter. He's a better defender at first base. He's a little more mobile than them
I think he's a lot more. Like, he makes some good plays at first base.
He does. So, but I mean, you could see him getting to that point maybe at the, past his 30s with his ankles and his conditioning if it doesn't improve. So I don't know. A deal we talked about it Wednesday. It's very tricky. I would like to see them pursue it if they could find something that works for both parties. I think that it could be very nice. I think that there's reason to talk about it. But at the end of the day, it is extremely tricky, as Jeff points out. Yeah. Jordan, speaking of Josh Naylor, is it safe to say Naylor was the centerpiece of the Clevenger trade? Boy, did we have a fun time discussing this off air because it brought us way down the rabbit hole. I'll say he was not the centerpiece. No. Gabby is one because he has the highest upside. Cantillo's 2 because he has the next highest upside.
And I would argue at the time, Quantrell was 3.
Yes, I would agree.
And then Naylor was actually 4. At that point in time, Naylor had 3 shots at the apple and had struggled. I mean, he had not. Now, yes. But I would also say, like, in fairness to that, every single big trade they've made, the Sabathia trade, we spent some time with Matt Laporta, still the weirdest fail in Cleveland Guardians prospect history.
It was a fun conversation to have.
Yeah, we had a fun conversation on Matt Laporta because there was no, that dude should have been successful. There is no, it doesn't make any sense. He didn't strike out too much. He had good power rates. Maybe he's a little too pool happy, but my goodness, like he did everything statistically well. Like he's just, but Brantley was the secondary piece.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Carlos Carrasco was the secondary piece to Jason Knapp. Carlos Santana.
That was the Cliff Lee deal.
Yeah, the Cliff Lee deal. At the time, like Carlos Santana started the year ranked below John Malone. If you go back to the Casey Blake deal.
Really?
Yes. John Malone was a top 10 guy. Carlos Santana was outside the list.
I didn't think John Malone was the piece of that deal. I thought Carlos Santana was
I think it was Santana as well. And I think they had talked about a CC deal. When that fell apart, Santana was always the guy they wanted. So they made it work. I think they ate salary to get that one done, as I recall. Thankfully turned into a fantastic trade. But a lot of these trades, it is not the centerpieces that end up being the piece later. And like I said, with this one, you know, they got 5 pieces.
This is why you do it this way. This is why you make everybody. And I'm not saying it's a foolproof thing, but this is why the Guardians do it this way because the Lindor trade's a little bit different because they traded Carrasco on a salary dump. Yeah. They did take extra bites at this thing with the Lindor trade too, right? You got a Med, which we're going to talk about that. Got Jimenez, who looks like he is going to be the best player in this trade.
And he was. That's the one case where the centerpiece has stayed the centerpiece.
Yeah, and the two guys in the minors just aren't. I don't think they're ever going to make it. We'll see about.
And I just want to throw one other thing on this. I know we're going long on this, but a really great example of all this is the trade for Trevor Bauer. So not when they got him, when they traded him out, because everyone, when that Trevor Bauer deal happened, was giving San Diego credit because they took all that draft capital and turned it into one guy. They powered it up. They, I can't think of the word, consolidated, right? And they got Taylor Trammell, a top 30 prospect, and gave up, these lesser pieces. But what happens when Taylor Trammell doesn't work out is then you end up with nothing. And listen, I wish Fran Mill had kept hitting. There's not a lot of great excuses for what caused him to seem like he aged in dog years in his time in Cleveland. It seemed like he went from like 25 to 35 overnight. But he was productive in his time here, and he should still be part of this core. That's my annoyance now. But shunting that deal worked out because they didn't consolidate. They kept it wide. And you can go back to the other Trevor Bauer deal when they shipped out Chu and got Trevor Bauer, Matt Albers, and Brian Shaw, while also shipping out like Jason Donald, who they didn't need. Like they've built this team so successfully that way.
Yeah, that's why you do it this way, because like you said, it's not always the centerpiece that works out. Matt Laporta didn't work out. Michael Brantley, great piece. Jason Knapp, injuries took him away. Carlos Carrasco works out. The Padres trade, the Bauer thing, I mean, okay, there's nobody left from that trade, but I wouldn't say the Reds got a whole ton out of it either, because I know he won a Cy Young in 2020, but it's 2020, and they got nothing else out of that. And
it was the draft pick, though. They did turn it into the draft pick.
That's true. They did turn the draft. Who did they take in that pick while you're?
I'm going to pull that up for you.
Okay, and then the Padres, like you said, ended up with nothing in that case. So that is why you make these trades this way. So when you're talking about, if they trade Savali, you're not, could they turn it into a Tyler Mahle type trade? That's what you're hoping for, because the Twins completely biffed that one too. That's why you do this though, because the centerpiece doesn't always work out. The secondary stuff secondary guys can be the guys that make it. And I think, there's still a good chance for Cantillo out of that trade. And I still have hope for Arias too. I mean, I still think there's a chance he could be
Jay Allen.
Okay.
30.
I mean, I don't want to say he's not going to make it, but it's not looking good so far for Jay Allen. He's a good athlete though. We'll see. So yeah, and when the Guardians do make these trades, the Kluber deal was a little bit different. They got, Clase, which turned into a good one. They got DeShields, which was terrible. But hey,
and that was, from what I understand, they were going to get DeShields was a salary dump. They had other, like I talked to someone who was connected with the Angels, not my buddy Taylor Blake Ward, but someone else who thought that Brandon Marsh was the guy that they were close to a deal on for him. they really like Class A. They thought he had elite traits, and that's why they did that very rare deal for them.
Yeah. All right. Our buddy Chuck, how do you think Will Dion stuff will play at the major league level? And he also wants a trade deadline prediction for us. So I watched Will Dion start the other day, and I had a buddy who was there in person to kind of give me.
Can I just interrupt you for 1 second? I also want to give a shout out to @ScarBlack44 who says, does Will Dion have a future as a regular reliever starter in the big leagues? He keeps performing at every level. So Scar Black also asked a Will Dion question. So I just wanted to tie that in.
I think he has a major league future. I do think Will Dion has a major league future. I just don't think it's going to be. I'm not sure he's going to be quite Josh Tomlin, because the other day Will Dion barely hit 90. Like, he was just hitting 90 in AA. That's not going to play at the big league level very well. I know he throws everything for strikes. I like the curveball. I like the changeup. I like the delivery. I think he has, he commands everything pretty well. I think you're talking about an Adam Plutko type starter for him. I think that's what he looks like.
Which is more valuable because he's a lefty, but I also do wonder too, like, could it play up in the pen? I'll always be curious about that with him.
I would agree with that too. I think he could have a nice career as like in maybe an Eli Morgan type reliever, where his fastball is more, because even Morgan as a starter was like 89, 92. Yeah. Dion could maybe be 92, 90, 93 as a reliever with command, and he has 3-4 good pitches. Maybe he could be a Curry. He could be a guy like Xavier Curry, who he doesn't have Curry's velocity because I think Curry gets to 94 out of the pen. I don't know if Dion's going to quite get there. Maybe he will someday, but yeah, he's got a major league future. I love the secondary stuff. I love the command. It's just not a good fastball, and it's going to take a unique sequencing from him, but it can work. I think it can work. And then Chuck also wants a trade deadline prediction for us. Let me say it this way. If you want Ahmed Rosario to not play for the Guardians, not be in the lineup every day, you're going to have to pull a money ball. You're just going to have to go out and be like, look, the lineup is yours to fill out, but you can't play Ahmed Rosario because he no longer plays for his team. You just have to make the trade, and then he can no longer be on the lineup card. If they fall out, I don't know. Jeff, do you think there is a team out there that needs pitching enough? And everybody needs pitching, let's be honest. If you're a contender, you probably need pitching to different levels. And the trading market for pitching this year is going to be so bare. Is there a team out there who's going to look at Aaron Savali and say, okay, this is a guy who is like a fourth starter, maybe a third starter. He's got club control. He won't cost as much as like an ace. We're not getting an ace for that, so we don't have to give up as much. Is there a team out there that can look at him and say, we'll make a trade for him that's also going to meet the Guardians' price? That's my question. I think if they fall out of it,
are the only team that really makes sense to me. We've discussed them ad nauseum because of their hitting depth, but that's
because what about the Tampa Bay Rays?
Oh, I mean,
Tampa Bay Rays want somebody with club control. They need a starter.
I mean, yeah, I've brought them up before. Like, I would love to.
You know who would be a really good fit in that trade?
Yanni Diaz.
No, I was thinking a hard-hitting infielder. I was thinking a guy that, like Christian Encarnacion-Strand, probably a corner infielder. Not really good defensively, but hits the ball hard for a ton of power.
I don't think they can get Junior Caminero from them. I don't think they're giving him up. I'm sorry. I don't think you can get
for Aaron
him out
Savali
of that situation.
You're like,
no.
Look, we'll give you. How about a 1-for-1 deal? Aaron Savali just for Junior Caminero.
We'll throw in Tobias Myers. I don't think I
don't know where Tobias Myers is. They don't need Miles Straw. They don't need Ahmed Rosario. I don't know.
I mean, they could use pitching.
They could use a reliever. Maybe you can give them one of the relievers. I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, Tampa and Cincy are the places.
Yeah, I'm just like, I would love to see them, because Tyler Mahle was not an ace. Like, he was a 3-4 starter.
He had a little more ceiling than Savali and didn't have the health issues coming in.
Are you sure? Because he got hurt immediately after.
I know he got hurt immediately after, but I
don't know.
Feels like everyone, a lot of those guys traded were already damaged goods, but it's.
Yeah. Here's a question for you, Jeff, from Dustin. Looks like he is from the hometown of the Kent State first baseman who got taken in the 15th round by Colorado. He is curious what do 15th rounders do in the big leagues? You got any data on 15th rounders?
It's not great. Here, I'll pull up the
Tim
tell you
Herron,
what,
right? No, Tim Herron
no,
was
he was
drafted in round no longer.
22nd
That's
round.
right. Yeah.
So he's talking about Aiden Longwell. We had to debate off air. I'm like, Treadwell. It's like, no, that's the wrong well. But I mentioned, like, this kid has really good batted ball data, makes a lot of contact, a better athlete than your typical first baseman. He set records at Maslin. I assume he's talking about Maslin as a quarterback. Now, in terms of the Cleveland Guardians, 15th round, here are their picks. They have had 58 players they've drafted in that round. Many of them didn't sign, so there's always that as well. The best player ever, Jerry Dubniski. I know there's someone out Dubzinski from Cleveland State who was worth 2 points. He played in 468 big league games, and he was in 1977. Second, Kyle Nelson, the reliever, who's now with the D-backs, who's up to 96 games. Next most games is Bryan Lavastida. And then you have Matt White and Roland de la Maza, who I don't remember at all, who's taken in 1993. No. And then everyone else is there is there's guys you might remember, like Nelly Cruz, who is a recent kind of guy people really liked with that pick. But yeah, it is often it is a far road. Let's put it that way. It is a very hard situation. You have to prove yourself. Other 15th rounders currently in the minors: Adam Tulloch, Alaska Abney, and Trey Benton. I did like Luke Eubank, who they took a few years ago. Just didn't come together for him. But yeah, it's uphill. It's not impossible, but it's uphill.
Yeah. And then we have some YouTube questions to go still too. But John wants to know, does Jonathan Rodriguez have a chance to make it to the big leagues? I think so. I think Jonathan Rodriguez can make it. I don't think it's going to be a big league, like a serious role. There's too much swing and miss there. He doesn't have a lot of defensive value. He's got a good arm. The power probably is real, especially in that ballpark he's doing it in right now in Akron. He ends up being, I don't know, I could see, I'm trying to think of a good outfield comp here.
I'm terrible
at comps. A poor man's Franmil Reyes. Like, he's not going to get to as much power as Franmil did, but the power's there. He'll strike out a little bit
of a better defender than Franmil.
Yeah, he's got a great arm, so I could definitely see that. I'm just trying to think of other outfielders that he could be, but it's going to be a rough one for him because he's just not going to make a whole lot of contact, and he's got to maximize power. In a lot of ways, like a poor man's Teoscar Hernandez. Like right now, Teoscar Hernandez is hitting 240, 294, 419, 15 homers. I could see that for Jonathan Rodriguez, in a good year, maybe. I'm trying to see what else is out there. It's not like you wish he could become Jorge Soler. I don't think he'll ever become Jorge Soler. That's like the top of the outcome for him, I suppose. That's about it. So you got some YouTube questions?
I do. We got 2 more left on YouTube. At David Weber, what's the difference in what the front office did this offseason, trading Jones and Benson? Any different than what they've done than what we've been asking them to do with middle infielders? Jones, Benson, Brendan Valera versus Freeman, Aria, Rocchio. Are we, as fans, just upset on results? How much will the results impact on what they do with middle infielders this offseason? I don't think it's the same because they didn't move on from Jones and Benson because of like logjam in the outfield, because I think we've seen there isn't really one there. They moved on from them because they want contact first. If you walk, it's a bonus. Jones and Benson are contact's the weakest skill. They walk a lot and there's power, but they strike out. Like they're the antithesis of how they're building lineups.
Yeah, that was a different regime that took in terms of how the draft has been run. Guys who've been in charge of the draft, because people make the mistake all the time that the GMs make the picks. The GMs do not make the picks. It is your director of amateur scouting who
unless you got a super high selection and your GM is like focused on that because you're not very good.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can get player development strategy and draft strategy from your GM. You can kind of set the strategy you're looking for to a certain degree, but it's always the guy who is in charge of scouting, amateur scouting, who is making those picks. So the GMs don't have a whole lot of influence in terms of they're going to let if they are smart, if they believe they've hired the right guys, which Cleveland does believe in. Hey, if we hire the person we like for this role, we're going to let them go out and make their decisions and do their thing. For the Guardians, that guy who was the director of that draft? He's still
was in the organization.
Not Bud Grant, Brad Grant.
Brad Grant. I always do that.
But Bud Grant was the Browns defensive coordinator.
Coach. Yeah.
Coach.
Always do that.
Yeah. So that was Brad Grant. That was 2 guys ago. They're on 2 guys since then. So, or no, Scott Barnesby, and now it seems to be Paul Gillespie, who is treading in that direction. So, yeah, they have just kind of changed philosophy since then. That's the hard part about it, is it's not the same philosophy as it was back then that made those picks. And they picked a lot higher that year with Benson as well, because it was coming off was it a wild card year?
No. Benson they didn't make anything. That's the one year they weren't even close. That's the worst. Tito's worst year was 20.
That's right, 2015. So it was a higher pick that year.
Yeah, that's the highest pick they've had since essentially the highest Tito's pick of the Tito era. Except
for the DeLauder pick?
No, DeLauder was later. He was 16.
Wow.
He was 14.
That's amazing, truthfully. Yeah, so philosophies change. That's just what happens, unfortunately. And you've got to buy into your development system that they can turn these guys that you're drafting into what you want. That's why everyone's got to be on the same page. And right now, I think it's too soon to say that this strategy is not working out. I would say right now it hasn't worked out yet. But the Tyler Freemans, the Brian Rocchios, the Will Brennans have all gotten to the major leagues. They haven't had a ton of sustained success yet. They need to prove that they can, but it's going to take some more time. And look, it may be a flop. It may be a few years before they decide, well, this didn't work. We won a couple division titles. We didn't go far enough, or we didn't win enough division titles. The draft is a long process. That's why you have to get it right, because,
it takes a while.
Yeah. All right. Any more questions?
Yes. One more question from Caleb. Trying to temper expectations here, but Juan Brito is making a case to be the best prospect in the system by the offseason with graduates, and with the injury concerns of Espina and DeLauder. Does he have a legit shot at making the opening day roster in 2024? And if he gets some AAA time this year, and continues to perform, and if that was the case, would you be opposed to moving Jimenez to short, giving Brito a shot at second base, his primary position, even with his defensive problems? Rocchio deserves a shot first, but Brito has the best hit tool amongst our prospects.
I don't know if Brito has the best hit tool among the prospects. I'm not sure I agree with that, but I don't see him making the open day roster next year because he's not in AAA this year.
Yeah.
A lot would have to happen, especially, when they're obviously going to extend the med for 5 more years, right?
And
you still have Arias, you still have Freeman, you still have
Rocchio.
And you don't even know which of those guys is going to play second, are they going to, because there's always a chance they keep Jimenez at second base because that's where he's playing well at, and they might not want to upset that whole dynamic. I don't know. If they do it with Rocchio and Arias playing short, that's fine. If you put a Freeman at short and Jimenez at second, then you've got a problem. But
yeah, I think at the end of the day, Brito actually isn't a second baseman. He's a first base left fielder. It's like I think he could end up being the left fielder of the future as well.
If they hadn't banned the shift, I could say Brito can stay at second because you could at least defensively position him to make up for his deficiencies, kind of like a Ronnie Belliard type. But unfortunately, they don't have the shift anymore. So they've limited how you can shift for the most part, I should say. They haven't said you can't shift, but you can certainly move as far to the sides as you want. You have to be on the dirt. But yeah, if you were able to play on the grass before or still, and you could do all those shifting, I could say you could hide the deficiencies. But yeah, now I don't know. I don't see a case for him making the opening day roster next year. Even if he gets AAA time this year, I could see him getting to AAA after the trade deadline, depending on how things shake out. after they maybe make some moves, but
they're keeping him ed. Nothing's happening at the deadline. Sorry, Chuck. And he'll be in Double-A because they have no spot on the roster for him in Triple-A.
Yeah, I think
Ricchio's got to sit there, and it feels like a lot of the statements, coming out are. I mean, maybe they'll do the opposite because it feels like the statements are, not.
They were pretty dry.
Are pretty, they're pretty close-lipped in general, but it does feel like they aren't really looking to shake the boat too much. And there's a lot of teams looking for bats right now. And
everyone, especially now the Mariners are too, because Jared Kelenic just broke his foot. So
because he's kicking
old Plesac. Yeah. So
yeah.
that's not good. I mean, look, the Rangers need pitching. The Rays are going to want pitching. The Orioles want pitching.
And the problem is things like, we had a listener ask us, like, bring up a Diamondbacks deal, and I like the idea of it because the Diamondbacks have outfielders for days, but the killer with the Diamondbacks is like none of these guys are proven, right? Like none of these guys have done it for more than 6 months.
We have Jake McCarthy at home. Yeah. We don't need more Jake McCarthy.
That's why that's why the Reds stand out to me. Or and again, going back to your comment, the Rays, it's like I don't think you can get Kyle Manzardo.
Bring Junior home. If you
go, the Rays. I mean, Vidal,
Kyle Manzardo.
Kyle Manzardo. Yeah, I don't know if you can get him, but it's like Vidal Brujan, however you say his name, is like the only guy who has failed for them. They're so good at development. Like I'm willing to gamble with them, not so much with like the Diamondbacks, but I did see Dominic Canzone hit his first home run, who I've been trying to get the Guardians to trade for. So there is kudos to him and to any of his family who might listen as a Northeast Ohio kid.
Every trade they make with the Rays goes poorly. Like Peyton Battenfield's been fine, and they didn't. The Rays did not get better. Yeah, he did not. He had one postseason home run. They won
that is a win. Batenfield for Luplo is a win for the Guardians.
You got Curtis Mead. What is Ruben Cardenas doing there? Ooh, Ruben Cardenas is
not good. Last I checked,
he's striking out a lot, but he has 16 AAA homers and a 464 slug. He's walking. It's not bad. Yeah, Kyle Manzardo is not actually hitting a great this year. He's not having a great year in AAA, but he's fine. I still would love Kyle Manzardo. Kyle Manzardo fits a lot of what the Guardians would like. So that would be an interesting way.
And I think he could play left field again. He's probably a first baseman, but
Curtis Mead might be an interesting guy for them. He does a lot of things they like as well. Yeah, I would definitely go ahead and ask the Rays who they're willing to give up for an Aaron Savali, and if you want and Daniel De Los Santos for your bullpen, sure, we can have that discussion as well. But they've had bad luck with trades with the Rays in the past. So if the Rays are willing to give a guy up, you really have to ask yourself, okay, why are they willing to give this guy up first? Used to be the Guardians like that, right? Why are they willing to give this guy up? What's wrong here? And that's still the case. Like the Guardians are good at giving up minor league or major league players. Like people should be asking, why do they want to give up Aaron Savali? Why do they want to give up Corey Kluber? Why do they want to give up Trevor Bauer? Why do they want to give up Mike Clevenger? You should ask yourself that. But when it comes to prospects, it's the other way around. And do you think in some way, this is a discussion we should have another time because we don't have time for this today. Do you think in some ways when they make some trades like the Junior Caminero, Tobias Myers deal, are they kind of snake bitten? Like, oh, we don't want to trade Brian Roque, or we don't want to trade Tyler Freeman because we messed this one up. Now we're a little bit gun shy. I don't know.
They seem to be the opposite. They seem to be that team that just doesn't care. Like they're just like, we have our view. It's our view. End of story.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're getting too gun shy, but we have an extra long Friday. So I hope everyone enjoyed it who jumped on the YouTube and did the mailbag fan engagement part here. But I want to remind you again to make sure you are watching every day, downloading, leaving comments, leaving a review on iTunes. All that stuff is very important. Thank you. Do you have any other comments, or should I go ahead and put this one to bed?
Let's put it to bed.
Okay. Again, thank you all. Thank you to all of our everydayers, and go Guardians. Oh, sorry, I messed that up. Thank you for everything you do, and go Guardians, go.